What is up, guys? This is James with Imagery Wedding Films. We get asked so much about what frame rates we shoot in and why. So I wanted to release a video that kind of just tells you guys a little bit about why we choose the various frame rates we do and when we use them throughout our day. So majority of our day, we are shooting in 60 frames per second. The reason we shoot in 60 frames per second is because it gives us the ability to slow down any shot we want. It saves us time. So if we were to shoot in 24 frames per second for anything we wanted in normal speed, and then switch over to 60 frames per second for anything we want in slow motion, that's just a lot of toggling back and forth. That's unnecessary. And if you're saying, oh, this is a great shot, let me go to 60 frames per second, and you dial in your settings, that moment may have happened already. Knowing that our camera is already shooting in 60 frames per second allows us to film everything, and then in post, we set Final Cut timeline to 24 frames per second. So it drops all of those unnecessary frames. That 60 frames per second kept normal speed on a 24p timeline looks great. You can't tell the difference. So for us, it's just safe to do it that way. You know, we film everything, you know, all of our prep is in 60 frames per second. The pre-sessional is 60 frames per second. That way we're getting a really nice slow motion shot of the groom's reaction, especially if he's emotional and crying. We get a really nice slow motion shot of the bride walking down the aisle, which is always great. We use slow motion for couple portraits. We use slow motion for anything B-roll or gimbal related, any establishing shots. We always shoot in 60 frames per second. And then all of the reception is pretty much shot in 60 frames per second. So that way with dancing, we are able to incorporate slow motion dancing, we can do some speed ramping, or we can just keep it normal speed, but at least we know we have the option, if we wanted to, in post, to slow it down. With 24 frames per second, we are only really using that for the ceremony and then for natural audio moments such as like the toasts. Those are pretty much the only times throughout the day that we are shooting in 24 frames per second. You know, ceremony always is gonna be 24 frames per second. The recessional, where they were just pronounced husband and wife, we will switch back over to 60 frames per second so that we can get a really nice movement shot, kind of tracking with them as they're coming down the aisle, especially if they stop mid-aisle and the photographer makes them kiss. We like to have that moment in slow motion. But 24 frames per second for the entire ceremony, and then 24 frames per second for toast. So the camera that's on the person giving the toast and the couple's reaction camera is all gonna be in 24 frames per second. And the reason we do that is just because we know we're never gonna use slow motion for a toast. There's no reason for you to slow down and shoot in slow motion someone giving a speech. Like, you would never do that. So that's why it's 24 frames per second. So there you have it. Those are the frame rates that we choose to shoot on a wedding day and why we choose to shoot them. Hopefully this video was informative to you guys. Please hit subscribe and we'll see you on the next one.